Hello and welcome to the Bloodstream Podcast, a show serving the greater bleeding disorders community, brought to you by Believe Limited and Bloodstream Media, and made possible by our presenting sponsor, Takeda. I am your patient advocate and host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your healthcare advocate, nonprofit nerd, and your other host, Amy Board, reminding you to please speak with a healthcare professional before making any treatment decisions.
On today's show, social workers at hemophilia treatment centers. They do a lot.
They do.
Sometimes we as patients and caregivers think that they do everything.
We do think that.
So what exactly is the role of HTC social workers? I sat down with SW's Kathaleen Schnur and Dianne Bartlett about their ever-evolving role in the HTC Comprehensive Integrated Care System. And Amy and I present the latest I'm Fine segment, challenging entrenched thinking and ideas about our health as people with bleeding disorders, with this segment's focus on factor levels.
Yes.
What do factor levels actually mean to me as a patient today, with the numerous therapies available for people with hemophilia, a topic that I personally have some strong feelings about.
That is a huge shocker.
We have got all of that and more on today's episode. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Listeners, as always, thank you for joining us today. And if you like what you hear, please share this episode with friends and family on social media. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this thing wherever you get your podcast.
Such a good idea. I want to remind you as well, dear listeners, that the Bloodstream Podcast is indeed made possible thanks to our presenting sponsor, Takeda. Yes, that's right. Takeda. Hey, Takeda has got this website, bleedingdisorders.com, where you can learn all about Takeda's resources for and commitment to the bleeding disorders community. Takeda believes in a world free of bleeds, Amy Board.
That they do.
And they are dedicated more than ever in their efforts to offer a wide range of programs and support to help patients throughout their treatment journey, wherever on that journey they may be. And you can learn more by simply visiting bleedingdisorders.com. One more time, JIC, bleedingdisorders.com. And for their founding and ongoing support of the Bloodstream Podcast, I would just like to say thanks, Takeda.
Thank you, Takeda.
Amy Board, we were interviewed yesterday.
It was a switch of roles.
It was a switch of
roles.
roles.
It was kind of weird. We were super subdued.
We were a little subdued, but it was for the written word.
No, it was for written word, so it wasn't weird. But I don't know if we can say what it's for, but it's going to be awesome, and we'll share it on all the things when it comes out.
Oh, there's like a ironclad CDA of some kind
Probably.
that we have to respect?
100%.
Okay, well, very nice then. Well, it's nice to be back. It's been a minute. I missed you this past month
too.
plus.
I know.
You got wed, and then we stopped talking to each other for a while.
100%. Actually, that's super accurate. I got wed and we didn't talk.
That was it. We were like, all right, well, I guess that's the end.
Yep.
What's been going on? How was the honeymoon?
It was great.
I saw pictures of a lot of ice and big jackets.
We are now full-fledged wannabe polar explorers now. We went to Norway and Svalbard.
Svalbard, yeah,
Svalbard,
sure.
which it's like the topmost landmass, if you will, before you reach the Arctic Circle.
Got it.
And we fell in love with it. And so now we're Googling like how we can travel in the Arctic and like Antarctica. And spoiler alert, it's super expensive. Like there's no way that we're going to be able to be polar explorers. So just FYI, we'll let everybody know, but we're like psyched about ice.
What?
Sea ice is so cool. It's so cool. It was super cool.
What's so cool about it?
I don't know. It was just, we were in these boats that would be able to cut through. And so, it like, like a foot thick of ice. It's just incredible. Like the sea ice is over. Like nature is incredible. And all of the wildlife really is dependent on that ice, climate change, all the things. But anyway, it was really cool.
Any cool wildlife sightings?
Yeah, we saw beluga whales. We saw like a pod of beluga whales and it was lit. Like it was super cool. We did not see a polar bear. And so now we're like jonesing to see a polar bear, but they're tricky. They're tough to find.
Yeah. Why? They like hiding?
They do. They're just, they're specific. You have to be like in the right place at the right time.
I was in a group about a couple weeks ago, and 4 or 5 people for maybe an hour debated on who would win a grizzly bear, a brown bear, and a polar bear. And number one, I was surprised that this group of people, this wasn't like an animal group. This was just like, we're dudes.
Yeah.
And apparently everybody had done some research coming to this conversation. We had all sorts of facts flying around.
Yeah.
I have to say the polar bear got a lot of support from the masses of this group.
Well, the polar bear will eat will hunt humans, which is
Really?
not the case with like a grizzly bear.
Will hunt humans?
Now, a grizzly bear, if they get threatened,
Sure.
they will maul and like go after you, especially with cubs. Like they're not, you want to stay away from a grizzly bear, but polar bears will like sniff you out.
Wow.
So like in Svalbard, you can't go beyond like the ringed around safe area without a gun. It's like that's like the
Whoa.
town rule, and so everybody would carry guns when they would like go off trail out of the town.
Well, you guys didn't do that?
No, but and I was. It took me a while to get used to it because of course we watched all these shows on Svalbard before we went, and
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
it was eerie. I was like, I think there's going to be a polar bear, and then by the end of it, since we didn't see a polar bear, I was like, come on, polar bear, sniff us out. Let's get in here. Let's do this.
I heard you were a hunter.
100%. Prove it, buddy.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Since this is a hunting podcast, I also, in a separate conversation, different from my grizzly bear, polar bear, grizzly
Great.
people, I recently learned that in parts of Georgia and I think South Carolina maybe,
Okay.
alligators have become an invasive species. And so now the state of Georgia releases a certain number of alligator hunting licenses because they have
Yes.
no predator.
Yes.
And this guy from Georgia was telling me about it. And for the first time in my life, I was like, maybe I want to go hunting.
Maybe you want to go. They do that with boa constrictors too in Florida.
Whoa.
Because boa constrictors, I can't believe this is what we're talking about. I hope it stays in. Boa constrictors, like pets, got out in Florida, and they're invasive, and they make a mess of the climate and all of the stuff down there. And so there is a license for a certain amount of year where you can go out and like capture boa constrictors.
Yeah, I think I want to be the guy like on the boat or next to the boa constrictor
Okay.
hunter. Like I don't
Yeah.
need to be leading the charge.
Right.
But I'm sort of interested in being in the scene.
PGL, there's a show about it on somewhere. Rob will tell you.
Okay. All right. We'll follow up after this podcast about hunting.
It's pythons!
Pythons, we've been corrected. Wow.
Okay,
People
our
have this
producer
knowledge.
Keith. Okay,
This is what I'm talking about,
this
though.
is why producer Keith is important to the team. Of course, it's pythons.
I feel like I missed an email about animal hunting behaviors. How does everyone just
Also,
know this stuff?
Aren't pythons boa constrictors?
Keith, we're going to need you again.
Keith?
The answer is no. Okay, that's good. Simple and to the point. All right. Well, we
Okay,
have some
great.
research and follow-up and shows to watch,
Great.
and
Great.
we will certainly be keeping everybody
Dear
posted.
listeners, we're going to keep you posted.
However, now we are going to move on to the first segment of the show, which is brought to you by Genentech. When you're in need of support along your hemophilia A journey, talk to a Genentech account and community manager, or ACM. That's like a social worker or an SW, but this is an ACM. See, I'm going to make a catch on. ACMs offer one-on-one support about a treatment option and can help you understand insurance coverage options, which is an important part of the equation. It's important to note that ACMs are Genentech employees and do not provide medical advice. Talk to your doctor if you have questions about your treatment. Know that when you're connected to an ACM, someone is in your corner. Sign up for one-on-one support from your local account and community manager at www.talktoanacm.com. That's talktoanacm.com. And as always, you can find that link in the program notes. Now, on to the interview. Doodle-doodle-doo. All right, Bloodstream listeners, I am joined by Dianne Bartlett and Kathaleen Schnur, authors on the paper titled Defining the Micro and Macro Roles of a Hemophilia Treatment Center Social Worker in the United States from an Interdisciplinary Team Perspective. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. And Dianne, Kathaleen, appreciate having you on. Welcome to Bloodstream.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So that's the paper that we want to talk about. That's the subject. But just to give the audience a little sense of who it is they're hearing from today, Dianne, maybe we'll start with you, and then Kathaleen, you thereafter. If you could just kind of give us the TLDR version of your backstory and blood disorders. How is it that you came to be an author on such an article?
Oh, goodness. Well, I have been a master prepared social worker for over 30 years, and I'm a clinical social worker and have worked with bleeding disorders a little over 7 years. And so Kathleen and I and the other authors know each other from working on a social work working group. One of the great things is this research proposal came up. We were having a meeting and we were talking about just how frustrated sometimes we are that there's a disconnect between what we actually do and what other people think that we do. And I'm a strong advocate for our profession and working to the top of our licensure. And so that's kind of how, it started.
Excellent. Appreciate that. Kathleen, what about for you?
So I am Kathaleen Schnur, and I am a clinical social worker. I've worked in hemophilia space for a decade currently. And just to echo Dianne, we were at BDC in Anaheim in 2018, actually, and it became a conversation. We created a task force about how we wanted to establish the scope of practice and standards of care for social workers. So it started from there. There was a small task force. We did a lot of lit review, a lot of it based off of Peg Gary et al., their research that was from 2010 and then presented the second part in 2016. And they kind of did, the second paper really said what the ideal role versus the actual role. And we're like, this is a great start. Okay, so now we have defined what we think we should be doing versus what we are doing. But maybe the disconnect is maybe the providers aren't fully aware of the scope of our practice and our licensure. So let's find out what they think we should be doing versus let's do an outreach to what we are doing. And then we decided to apply for the Social Work Excellence Grant, got it, and in the middle of COVID decided to try this. It just were really, really It was such a great start and a great conversation to build on the early work of such amazing social workers that are in the community and have been for such a long time.
And Dianne, what were some of the key tenets to this work that, to Kathleen's point, building upon previous work in the space, what were some of the key tenets to drive the methodology and the structure for your work?
Great question. I mean, really, we knew we had a solid foundation with the previous research, but some time had passed, and so we knew it needed to be updated. We also came from some different lenses as well. We're all clinical licensure social workers. That is the top level of licensure that you can receive nationwide for social workers, and we wanted to resurvey, see, hey, are the HTC social workers still coming from the same background? It is an amazing network that we have, and it's very unique to other types of medical social work that I've done.
How so?
And, well, for instance, we're an older, more seasoned, wiser group of social workers. Specifically, most of us are over the age of 30. We have long tenure. We've been a master prepared social worker. 87% of HTC social workers have their masters in social work. And so and a lot of us also have our clinical licensure. So even if you had your PhD, the top level of licensure you can assume is a clinical licensure, and majority of us have that as well. And we have different experiences because, as you know, every HTC is different. But we also have some barriers, and we have gone to accredited master programs where we know there's a micro perspective, that's the direct patient care. The meso perspective, that's kind of what I consider working with our chapters in our state. And then a macro perspective, and that's working like on a national thing or doing research and policy. And this is a unique role because it really combines all of those. And we know that. We know our training. We know that we've done research before with our graduate thesis. But I don't think our colleagues fully understand that. So it's not that some of the tasks that are done in an HTC are inappropriate. It's just that it's not working to the top of our licensure. And Or maybe it's more appropriate for a bachelor-prepared social worker and not someone with their clinical licensure. And then we also recognized that there were quite a few of us that had started to engage in research like the ATHN and the CDC registries and doing all that data and quality improvement work. And a lot of us were in leadership roles. We have some real trailblazed social workers nationwide that have elevated to the top to be their program managers, and yet their job descriptions hadn't been changed. And that's a disservice from a healthcare institution perspective.
Kathaleen, any comments on that?
Just to kind of like go back to, when Dianne just mentioned about how this was something so unique compared to other medical social work. Most of us out of HTCs are categorized as medical social workers, but our role extends far beyond this very narrow classification. We do provide essential medical social work services, including counseling, support for patients and families as they're navigating the medical system. But our responsibilities within the HTCs are much more expansive and very unique. We engage with people and, people new to HTCs or people who aren't familiar, and they're just enamored with just the vastness of what we do. As it was highlighted in the study, we engage in a wide range of activities: case management, outreach, administrative tax, and the research and grants. And our multifaceted role reflects the diverse needs of our bleeding disorder community and underscores the specialized expertise that we as HTC social workers bring to our positions. And it's just essential for everyone to recognize that we're not limited to traditional medical social work functions. And we encompass this comprehensive approach to addressing the psychosocial and practical needs of our patients and the families who are affected by bleeding disorders. It's just kind of just like our patients are so unique, so too are our roles as HTC social workers, reflecting that specialized care and support within our centers.
Yeah, and in addition, I'll tag to that, it's when we took that baseline of those broad categories and then we whittled them down to specifically what are some of those tasks within counseling or grants research or case management, financial, administrative, and to come back and see that a third of social workers are in administrative roles is huge. To see that over 50% of us are responsible for our registries and quality improvement and things. And so a lot of our colleagues understood that we were doing therapeutic interventions or counseling or brief psychosocial interventions, but they didn't understand fully that we were doing these other things. And we certainly weren't being compensated for them.
But I do think, too, something that was very motivating to this study as well, one, to make people aware of our role, but something that we mentioned throughout this is creating the standards of practice, because that's kind of how it started, was because if we in our HTCs are unable to fulfill our ideal role, then maybe our patients aren't receiving the full range of support services that we are qualified to provide them. And if this happens, then there's unmet psychosocial needs, limited advocacy, reduced care coordination, and then just negative impacts on our patients' well-being. So, it's important to align social workers' roles with the best practices so we can optimize our outreach to patient care.
One of the things that really resonated for us is, we came up with this idea in 2018. We distributed the survey during COVID in 2020. And that was a very unique time to practice in all the decades that we had been practicing as authors of this. And one of the things that we found, and now we know to be true with metrics, is the great need of mental health support for everyone, not just our patient population, but that's our focus here. And then the provider scarcity and how do you access that? And is it are we able to access it for multiple reasons? You know, the barriers are financial or insurance or distance and stuff. And yet most of us, well, we're 87% of us have masters in social work. And so we are able to provide those therapeutic interventions and provide counseling. But sometimes in medical social work, that may not be their lived experience in their career, but we have that training and we're able to. And we're able to be a bridge, because it can take a couple months to get established in the community. And yet we can provide psychotherapy and counseling services until they can get that community-based referral. And there's been challenges and barriers as in, you know, every setting, connecting people with that and actually doing that. But this study also highlighted what some of those barriers were. You know, is it organizational barriers, like we have too much work for a small number of people? Are we sharing our roles with other disease states like oncology versus only working in bleeding disorders? So there were some really some good pearls of the pain that came out from the study as well. And then our hope is to develop that document, like Kathaleen mentioned, so we can highlight some of those. And if there's a little imposter syndrome by maybe some of the other HTC social workers that haven't done those skills in a while, then we can provide further education and training. And we're doing that with different bodies within the bleeding disorder community.
I want to
helping us
talk
to get that
more about mental burden of disease and the mental health component to the role. The registries piece is interesting too. I mean, I guess this is a theme with the role of the social worker and the hemophilia treatment center, right? There's a whole lot of different interesting things that are on this list on page 5 that you referred to. It's quite a lot. But I want to, before too much forward looking, I just want to read a sentence here from the conclusion, or a couple of sentences from the conclusion of the study. While HTC staff value the social work role, it is apparent that the intricacies of the social work role are not fully appreciated or understood. This study illustrates a need for more advocacy by social workers to define their role in hemophilia treatment centers, more funding to support the social work role in hemophilia treatment centers, and elevating social work's role to equal the education and skill set they bring to HTCs. What key takeaways lead you to it is apparent that the intricacies are not fully appreciated or understood? We've talked about it, but I would just love to hear some more nail on the head specifics, like what makes that just irrefutable? And then let's talk about what does advocacy for the role in the HTCs look like. But let's do that first part. Why is it apparent? What makes it apparent?
I have a quick statement about that, and then I'm going to jump back to the study. So, I do want to just point out that social workers, we're strength-based, right? And we are doers, and we get things done. So we have historically just prioritized all tasks in the best interest of the patient, focusing on what needs to be done rather than disputing if it falls strictly within a job description. We joke that how much of our job is other duties as assigned, right? And as long as it isn't outside the scope of our licensure or education. So, we really want to use this to leverage our expertise in advanced licensure to prioritize those therapeutic support for patients over the administrative tasks. So it's one of those things where from this article, okay, look at everything that they're doing, but what everything they're capable of. So don't get me wrong, the administrative tasks, it's great, it's fulfilling, it adds to the broader picture, which is we are all about that holistic broader picture. But within that picture, who else can step in and do some of these things to get them done? So maybe we can, focus on spending that extra time with that patient, because that is our licensure. We do have the training and the capability to do interventions, to do brief, like a limited amount of therapy with patients. Like Dianne said, the wait list, especially for our most vulnerable, our seniors and our Medicaid patients, my gosh, the wait lists are just ridiculous. So what we want to pull from the study is the fact that, while the administrative tasks, we are doers, we're going to get it done, but is that how you want to utilize your clinical social worker when the need is apparent within the clinic that, some of our patients have these bigger needs. And if we have that skill set, how can we act now versus feeling overwhelmed about all of the other things that need to be done that maybe don't require that master's level clinical training?
I'll give you a real concrete example. I work in a hospital-based system, and so I feel rather fortunate to have some resources that other HTCs don't. Not that we don't have other unique challenges in a greater hospital system, but a great example is long-standing HTC social workers have helped with insurance, free factor, connecting to maybe Social Security and those other types of financial benefits. Working in my healthcare system, we have patient financial advocates. So I don't do anything insurance because that's not working to the top of my licensure.
Right.
Now, if it's something like your household budget need, oftentimes those resources like your utility company or an application to, Helping Hands or something requires the social worker intervention, but not those other things. And so in our healthcare system, we've hired patient financial advocates that do all of those insurance and more public health financial needs, and that can adequately be done by a bachelor prepared individual and not tee up someone where you're paying so much more an hour for a clinical licensure. That's just one example. And some other HTCs might have more of a robust research team that have data entry people to work on the Athens data set in the QI. I have leveraged that. I like that because I then can do joint visits with the medical team and I hear their story firsthand, and it's a better positive patient care experience. And then we can collectively identify the needs, and then I can offer to meet with them one-on-one. But that's just one tiny example of just because we've historically done that doesn't mean that we continue. And then how do we create that change? How are we, if we identify that, how are we being agents of change to identify change within the setting? And I know for myself, I had to highly advocate for myself even to become a program manager. I knew I'd been a program manager and in leadership and executive director of nonprofits before, but that was unique to our setting because it's a medical model. They've always had nurses or business people. And we can't forget that because we have our master's in social work, we have bachelors in other things. So sometimes that's psychology. Sometimes I was a finance major and before I went into social work. So we come with these really broad skill sets that sometimes aren't recognized fully or utilized fully.
And so what does good advocacy for social workers in the HTC look like? You've published this piece that it moves the needle. We're creating surround sound with something like this. So I appreciate those are part of how you create the change. But what else? What does good advocacy look like?
Networking. When I found out how many other social workers were leading their HTCs, I was like, wow, because I thought it was only Demia Dillard at UC Davis. I had no idea about Jennifer Borrello and Tulane and all the others that do amazing work across the nation. And now, I know there's a network, and I reached out to them when I wanted to have a different vision for the use of social workers within our HTC because we have these amazing trailblazers. That's one avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the networking as well, too, is I mean, because so often we're in these silos, especially if you're not part of a health system or if you're part of a health system, but you're separated from the social work department, so when you come together at these larger meetings, whether it's your region, whether it's BDC, whether it's GAMAGE, it's like you come together and you network and you're like, hey guys, I'm only this much FTE, but I'm drowning here. How do you guys advocate for your role? How do you, so I really love the community of people sharing, hey, this is a letter I sent to my people, and here are some papers that really demonstrate the impact and the importance of what we do in putting it in a different lens, because much like everything, there's just this evolution in growth within our HTCs, within the community, within skill sets, and how can we maximize that and share with other people so we can do this. And that's one of the things with this what prompted this standards of practice, is because while we appreciate and understand that every HTC is different, we're all social workers. We're all trained. If we went to an accredited, master's level, which most of us do, and have this higher level licensure, what are we capable of? And if we can make sure that, key stakeholders, leadership, even our patients, because if our patients know too, they can speak up as well. So if we have a whole community who are seeing what we are capable of, what our skill set is, and how that can significantly improve patient care if it's being utilized most effectively and efficiently, then we're making movement. And that is our goal.
I can't help but hear that and think about how much we talk about optimizing care for each individual patient. And the same underlying philosophy ought to apply for how we consider every member of the HTC's integrated specialized care team. Are we optimizing each individual's contribution to this integrated care model for each individual patient? Which speaks directly to making sure that social workers and everyone on the team is playing to their highest skill set, is working to the highest end of their credibility. That's a key takeaway from me from this conversation. I want to tie three things together in the interest of time, and I'll challenge the two of you to detangle them as you see fit in your answer, or keep them all batched.
Okay.
But I would like to, we're having fun. I would like to hear more about how this work, on the shoulders of previous work done in this direction, is leading to that standards of practice. I'd love to hear a little more about what comes next in that effort. Tied to that, though, I think, mental burden. Speaking as a patient, I know how much I believe and feel that challenges to my mental health and well-being intersect directly with hemophilia and the complications of hemophilia in my life, such as chronic pain. It seems as though, and this is part of the conversation that Kathaleen and I were having at the WFH Congress, it seems as though that as needs evolve and as therapies, we have more and more options, there's more and more durable, efficacious therapies out there, that the mental health needs of patients, in a way, those are allowed a little more space than they once were. When we were just struggling and fighting to survive, there was maybe a little less consideration about what entrenched resiliency did to limit the scope of life that I had for myself. But that's not the case now. At the same time, I do appreciate that if someone has moderate depressive disorder or bipolar disorder, that there are lines, perhaps, is maybe not the best way to describe it, but there are boundaries, there are limits to what the social worker and the hemophilia treatment center can offer the patient. And yet, there's a lot of intertangledness there. So as we move forward, as we think about the future of HTC sustainability and what are the services offered that continue to make sure that these centers of excellence are around for the long haul, how we account for the mental health of our patients, especially as we have a product class like gene therapeutics with a lot of known unknowns, a lot of long-term follow-up, a lot of identity question marks, and that ties into the third and final piece of this monstrous question, which is the registries. And part of when we talk about gene therapy in particular, but there are other new products coming. There are non-factor replacements already out, but we have rebalancing agents, a whole nother new product class. The follow-on registries of these things to ensure we're actually gathering, harmonizing, studying long-term real-world data, critical. And that too is on this monster list of things that apparently the social worker is supposed to be in charge of. So again, sorry about this, but how do we tie some of this together? How are we moving towards those standards of practice? Where does the mental health, mental burden piece come in? Where does the registries piece come in? And I will now be quiet.
Okay, I'm going to let me start, and then Dianne, you jump in. So, okay, so for the first thing, the mental health piece, I mean, so crucial. COVID happened, and people just, it was a need, and it was being normalized, but the need just grew so much that so many of us, it's like, okay, I know for me, it was like, okay, I have the skill set. I'm having trouble connecting you. I have the skill set. You know what? Let's do a few sessions, and we'll just kind of check in, and then while we're waiting to do a soft handoff to another clinician. And my goodness, how about we leverage these relationships that we have longstanding with our patients as well? Mm-hmm. So, you already have that rapport. So there's that ability to really make significant strides initially, especially if it's nothing that is of a crisis level that takes us down another route. So I think from, the mental health standpoint, just making sure that we get comfortable leaning in on the skills, making sure we're providing the trainings to the community that ultimately empowers our social workers, and also provides our patients that extra support. The standards of practice tool is crucial for a variety of reasons. We want to clarify those roles, the capabilities based on licensure, full FTE, and, with the appreciation, I always want to come back that every HTC is structured differently and operating within various systems and serving different patient size populations, which also plays into it. But this tool could really highlight the scope of that practice within HTC setting. So this way the social workers can focus on those tasks. So maybe if the need is there, the social worker can say, hey, I can advocate for more FTE, while also, providing those patients with the care they need. And then we can advocate for expanded services when it's needed too, because that's a key thing too, is if the services are needed, okay, let's expand it. So if we have the information, we can do that. These clear guidelines can inform HTC leadership about our valuable skill set that we're bringing to the team, and, leading to increased support and resources for social workers, which, if our patients are aware and our leadership is aware, it can empower our patients to seek out the care from the social worker instead of going elsewhere, Right. So, and then Dianne, because you're my numbers friend, I'm going to let you go in with all of the registries.
Yeah, and I'm going to segue a little bit from the direct practice as well to piggyback what Kathaleen said. So I do quite a bit of individual work, and a lot of education at the chapter level. And so building those relationships now, they are seeking my services because they've heard through their friends. I will say also, a lot of them are carriers. A lot of them are von Willebrand's patients or mild hemophiliacs. So generally, what the presenting problems are: adjustment to illness, caregiver distress, managing so many leaders in a household, relational stressors, which segue also in tag with gender roles. And because we're seeing more and more women and girls and people with the potential to menstruate in our clinics, there is some human sexuality components there. It's not STIs, it's talking about quality of life and heavy menstrual bleeding, and not because of our culture, not being fully aware of our anatomy physiology, how this impacts so many different things, period, poverty, on and on and on. And those types of, that's why it goes back to, I'm talking about financial issues, but I'm talking about household budget financial stressors. Less with insurance and more about how do we cover food and period poverty, and those types of things. Every human being on the planet has situational anxiety and depression. We know that to be true. We know when you have a chronic health condition. So if you polled the average person walking down your city street, it's about 20% will have situational anxiety or depression. But we know when you have a chronic health condition, that's going to be elevated a little bit more. So normalizing that. And what we also know is the most common treatment modality for that is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And that's like your bread and butter of going to graduate school. So you might not have used those skills recently as a social worker, a new social worker in my setting, but I can refresh your memory on those. I can empower you to use them. I can provide clinical supervision till you get started. That's our ethical responsibility, to mentor others that may be a little green on this, and that's okay. We can utilize some key stakeholders, whether that's our regional coordinators, to challenge institutional pushback. We can use our key stakeholders of other organizations that provide funding and educational opportunities, whether that's BDC, Hemophilia Alliance with the Linda Gamage conference, to provide trainings on those things. Also important. Now, we do so much, but they don't fall into those traditional billing cycles. So we have to get people to think in a different way about that, and look at more preventative health system in a preventative manner versus in a individual unit of billing. And but we have the means to do quality of life assessments. We can track these things. We just need to formalize it. And then we do that now within regions for transition or other things. And maybe we start looking about it more from the mental health and track that with some QI projects. But it's within our wheelhouse. And at the end of the day, it's population health, which is really changing our healthcare view and how healthcare systems are working with patient populations. And it's the right thing to do. It's the ethical thing to do. So if a social worker was pushing back to me, I would remind them of the social work in ASW Code of Ethics and saying, that's social justice. That's advocacy, whether that's on a micro, meso, macro level. That is networking with others, knowing what's within your scope, what you need more training on, and advocating for yourself to get that training. But I have never seen the training opportunities as robust as I have in my 8 years of working with bleeding disorders. It is unbelievable. I feel like I've hit the lottery, at this phase of my career. It's amazing. And everyone shares information. There's no gatekeeping intellectual property.
It's beautiful. It's just beautiful how everyone comes together and is constant. I mean, at any time I can text, I can email this national network of social workers saying, hey, any ideas for this, and this sharing and just making sure we're so motivated in the best interest of supporting our patients, because, this population and the treatments and the challenges are evolving and new things are coming up all the time. So we're trying to just constantly stay ahead on how we can best support our patient population and just maximizing our skill set. So
I'm in the Mountain States Hemophilia Network, so I'm in Mountain States region. I'm a little biased. I think it's the best. But at any rate, we have such robust centers, and in the modeling that occurs, so when you have team members providing yoga, when you have team members doing Tai Chi, when you have book clubs for our staff, when we have these enriching activities, we're practicing what we're preaching. And that, to me, is really important, and to model that. And it just becomes, again, it's less about this clinic visit and more about, as human beings, you use the word interconnectedness. How are we interconnecting with one another? How are we as a community lifting each other up and supporting and building those communities again? And it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do.
Well, as a patient, I very much appreciate the work that you're doing to help set the standards, create the guidelines for what this role is today and how it evolves moving into the future. Because as you've each just spoken to, we're moving into a new era. The needs will be different. How we meet those needs will be forever changing. How we're making sure that we are able to fund and support the various services and needs that each center is seeking to meet. All of it's in a very dynamic space. So I think it's quite important that social workers, physical therapists, each segment of the HTC care team has people such as yourselves, often in those working groups, as you've each spoken to as well, moving the ball forward, because this is not a static environment. Sometimes I worry that because our overall quality of health and life and broader hemophilia has risen so much in the United States in the last decade or two, that a bit of complacency sets in, and this idea that everything's kind of fine with a little problem here and a little problem there. And it's so much more dynamic than that. And conversations like this really bring that to life for me. So thank you, Dianne and Kathaleen, for engaging me on it. Listeners, there'll be a link to their article in the program notes, so you don't even have to do any Googling. You can just click the link in the article. And maybe at some point down the road a bit, when the next piece is published or there's some next step in the movement, so to speak, we can have you back on for an update.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
That'd be awesome.
Thank you for having us on and just putting the word out there, because there's a lot of work to be done, and I think a lot of it comes from just speaking to it, so the movement can happen. For sure. Happy to do it. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathaleen. Thank you, Dianne, for sharing your insights and your experiences. And thanks again to Genentech for supporting this segment. Once again, sign up for one-on-one support from your local Genentech account and community manager at www.talktoanacm.com.
And ACMs are different than SWs. I added that part.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that was my own
like
part of the copy. No,
okay.
Genentech didn't need us to say that part. But
I love social workers,
I do
and
too.
I think they're the bomb, and I really do think that they do like extraordinary things.
My social worker shouts out Dr. Jacqueline Lefkowitz at New York Presbyterian's HTC growing up, was probably the staff member who helped most normalize my experience of having hemophilia, because it wasn't talking about factor levels or joint pain. It was like, how is school going? How are your friends doing? Hey, did you hear about camp? Do you know about this? And I also have to give her credit, because the second project that Believe Limited ever produced, Helping Hanny, was specifically based on research that she did and presented at the BDC like 12, 13 years ago on the difference in a girl's experience depending on what age she's diagnosed. And I think it looked at 14 as a threshold age, late stage versus early. And so we did this 3-part animation of a girl at 7, 14, and 18 learning about her life with a bleeding disorder. And that was all thanks to Jackie's awesome research and wanting to take that research and turn it into narrative and story and something that more people could benefit from, because it was a room full of other social workers. It was like, this is so rich. We need to get this stuff out there. So thank you, Dr. Lefkowitz, for everything that you've done.
Love it. Love it. Love it. They also are so instrumental in access issues too, which is now like an elevated thing.
Always.
All the things. So
100%.
Anyway, so cool. Okay, moving on to our next segment, which I'm excited about. This one's great. Y'all. I'm Fine aims to wow.
What does it do?
I'm Fine aims to challenge entrenched ideas around chronic resiliency and satisfaction with suboptimal outcomes by inspiring people with hemophilia to seek education and truly consider the possibilities. Sanofi seeks to expand the idea of what's possible for the hemophilia community. So take a deeper look at the science behind hemophilia and an important connection between factor activity levels and potential activities at levelsmatter.com.
Levelsmatter.com.
Levels matter. And now let's get to the Next I'm Fine segment.
This is all I've ever known. Is that even
possible for me?
I don't want to miss anything.
I don't need that. I don't want to acknowledge my pain.
I don't want to get poked with needles.
I don't want that.
There's nothing wrong.
I'm fine.
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 We are living in an age where you can choose and manage your treatment based on your lifestyle. We have treatments that are FDA approved that could potentially raise factor levels to a mild range. And this poses the question, what do clotting factor levels mean to me? And what if, after experiencing this new age of hemophilia treatment, life as a mild is not necessarily something that I want? Let's talk with my co-host and my good friend Patrick Lynch about just that. Now, I do want to acknowledge that being in a position to consider a change in treatment is something of a privilege, considering access issues faced by people with hemophilia all around the world and considering that the overwhelming majority of rare diseases don't have any treatment options at all. Patrick, welcome back to I'm Fine.
Thank you so much for having me. You know, I thought my buddy Luke was supposed to be taking over this segment, give me a little bit of a break from the hot seat. I don't know where Luke, come back. It's very hot and I would like a break.
We love a PJL hot seat. It's so fun. Okay, so we're going to test your old man brain here.
Oh, God.
Put yourself like 5 years ago, back in the day.
Pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic?
Wow, BC before COVID.
Oh, my gosh. What a gentle time. When you heard about these new treatments that were coming down the pipe for hemophilia that could raise factor levels to a mild range, what was your thinking at the time? What excited you?
Well, it's an interesting question because I think if I go back 5 years and, you know, at that time we've got longer lasting half-life factor product recently out, but for A's, not that much longer lasting. There are gene therapy clinical trials moving along, and we're all hopeful and standing by and waiting. We're hearing about hemostatic rebalancing agents like fitusiran and manipulating the clotting cascade in these completely different ways than we're used to ever having to think about. But emicizumab, what's now known as Hemlibra, this bispecific monoclonal antibody, that was the big thing 5 years ago that we were all, with or without inhibitors, waiting with bated breath for phase 3 clinical trial readouts and eventually the FDA approval. But I do not remember the idea of identifying as now I get to be a mild.
Interesting.
I think that evolved over time. I think that evolved as first Hemlibra and eventually gene therapy, at least for hemophilia A, kind of saw where things netted out.
Right.
And then the messaging became, oh, it's like life with mild hemophilia. But that was never, for gene therapy, that was never the goal.
Yeah.
Still today, all the headlines are about cures.
Right.
Mild isn't the goal.
Right.
With Hemlibra and the idea of a subcutaneous product, I don't take factor on prophylaxis to live as a mild. That's not the goal. So how would it be moving forward to start a prophylactic treatment regimen that meant I was a mild? Why is that better? So I don't remember that framing at the time. And frankly, I think if that existed, I'll speak for myself, I would have been much less excited about the potential of the therapy if from the jump I thought my ceiling was to become a mild.
Interesting. What's your reality? Do you identify as a mild?
No, I don't. But I guess I guess that's how I live. I mean, I'll just be very candid, and I'm obviously speaking for myself. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody else's experience as a patient with their treatment, whatever. This is just me. But I waited a few years after emicizumab was approved to talk with my doctor about it and talk through my options. And I was having a baby and thought, you know, I'm sick of infusing. I'm done with every other day IV needles. And it's like, it's really becoming a thing for me. I'm about to have a baby. I want to reduce burden. I also don't want to be doing that while I have an infant. So the decision, it was clear, like, okay, this is the time for me. It's been out. I have a little more confidence. And it was life-changing. It was life-changing. I saw, you spoke earlier about after my ankle surgery and like a light that came into my eyes. I saw that in friends of mine and community people who had inhibitors, and they're telling us about their experience on Hemlibra. And I know the people at Genentech can't say it's life-changing. I can.
Yeah.
It's life-changing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It was life-changing for me. As time has gone by, I have been more aware, though, of sneaky bleeds and little bruising patterns that I didn't previously experience. I'm a little bit older, I'm heavier, I'm still trying to be active, and all of that is leading to more instances of bleeds. I'm using factor more often than I was in the first couple of years when I was on Hemlibra. So my reality, I guess, is that I am more of a mild now. But what I'm finding is that isn't satisfying for me. And I'm trying to figure out what do I do to correct for that. Some of it is on me in self-care, a better self-care practice, better diet, better exercise plan, better sleep, more hydration. All of that will help. But part of it, I think, is also the therapy. And so I'm once again talking to my doctor.
So what's your reaction to this statement? Life as a mild is not necessarily the life that I want.
Fact. I'm not trying to be a mild hemophiliac. I'm not trying to live with mild hemophilia. The goal has never been to live with mild hemophilia. When I was a child, the things that were done and prescribed and the efforts made for me as a patient were to normalize my life as best as possible. Living with mild hemophilia is not normal. So again, I think the message has changed as the data has kind of shaken out and we've learned, oh, this treatment option essentially means this. That's fine. And if that's true, that's great. Not for me. I'm not interested in living with mild hemophilia. I'm interested in living with no hemophilia or as absolutely close to it as possible, which may mean being someone with severe hemophilia who is on a factor prophylactic regimen.
And since this is the I'm fine mindset segment,
Yeah.
what is mindset with this? What is daily mindset? What is behavior change? Is it just addressing and identifying some things that is physical in your body that you feel? Tell me a little bit about your mindset.
Well, mindset's tricky. I think to your point about living as a mild person with mild hemophilia, I suppose you could argue that comes with it a certain mindset of, okay, I do have mild hemophilia. That means certain things are available to me and certain things are not. But the other odd thing about the treatment options that, to your disclaimer earlier, those of us fortunate enough to live in places with access can consider is that while I have mild hemophilia, I also still don't have factor. Like if I was producing 4% factor levels naturally, okay, I would have mild hemophilia, but there would be factor in my system. I have mild hemophilia, but there's no factor in my system. And factor and all the things that factor may do that we aren't aware of, right? The things that are baked into the cake, so to speak, when we're replacing what's missing as opposed to creating something mimicking a specific activity done by that which is missing. Well, what about the activities we don't know about? The role that factor VIII may play in bone healing. Well, if I don't have any factor VIII in my system, what does that mean for my bone health long term? So mindset, it plays a role here, but at the same time, there are some hard and fast truths about what is or is not happening inside the body. And I think for me, I'm at the point where that's what I want to dig into more. I think I can get my mindset where I need it for, okay, this is my dosing regimen. This is the kind of product I take. This is why I take it. But I need to understand what's happening inside of my body to make sure that my mindset and whatever decision I'm ultimately making is as fully informed as possible. And for me, that's the piece right now to dig into is like, what's actually going on inside my body? And I don't have as much clarity as I want, not today. Amy, to go back to one of the inspirations to make a change, to start talking to my doctor and then make a change from a factor replacement product to emicizumab Hemlibra was the emotional toll that intravenous infusions on a regular basis were finally taking on me after 35 plus years of putting a needle into my vein every other day, every third day, sometimes every day. I was done with that. So I have to remember too, as I'm in this stage of considering what it truly means to, be a mild on emicizumab, that making the switch to that other product does mean more frequent administration and a version of administration that is less pleasant than subcutaneous. I mean, I will say it was odd at first to be like, wait, I just jammed this into my belly and I can kind of be imprecise and it's fine. It's a very weird thing to get used to. But it's far easier than sticking my veins with those needles. So there is some reality check to come. There is some emotional mindset gearing up for, hey, if you want to make this switch, there are now even longer lasting factor products available, less frequent infusions needed. That's appealing to me. But I do have to remember that it got to a point that I was like emotionally burned out from intravenous factor administration. So if I'm going to be making a step in that direction, I think it's just important to keep in mind what was going on last time I was there with frequency.
As we wrap up our segment for today, we're left with thought-provoking questions about the significance of clotting factor levels and the impact of modern treatments on our lives. Thank you, as always, Patrick, for sharing your journey with us. And our listeners, remember that your voice matters, your story matters, and together we'll navigate the complexities of life with hemophilia. So stay safe and stay strong and keep advocating for the care that you deserve. We'll see you next month on I'm Fine.
Thank you, Amy, for facilitating that one. You and I in different outfits than we're in today. Same voices, different outfits for those watching
if you're watching on video, you might be like, wow, different outfits.
Sanofi aims to raise the bar for patients living with hemophilia. Reimagine what's possible by visiting rareblood.disorders.com to hear more about Sanofi's dedication to the bleeding disorders community. Thanks again to Dianne and Kathaleen for joining the program today. Thanks as always to our presenting sponsor, Takeda, bleedingdisorders.com. Segment sponsor, Genentech, and the I'm Fine segment sponsor, once again, Sanofi. We could not produce this show without your support, and we are grateful for it.
We are so thankful for you. Thanks, y'all.
Bordeaux, our next episode comes out July 14th. We are going to miss you on that one.
I know. I'm traveling.
You are traveling. Are you going to somewhere icy?
No, I'm going to Europe.
Why'd you say it like that?
I don't know. I don't know. For some reason, like I think I feel insecure that I get to go to France. I'm going to France. It's cool. And it's for
That's
work,
cool.
but it's cool.
Yeah, you can own
I'm
that.
self-conscious about it.
No, well, thanks for sharing that, but that's cool. You just got to come back and tell us about it, or we'll be
I know.
like,
We should do an I'm fine about like, I'm fine going to Paris.
Good to know. Amy's fine going to Paris. Good to know. Well, since you have the script in front of you, tell me, what can listeners expect to hear from me?
That's the funniest thing I've said on this podcast. No, we have a phenomenal interview. I'm actually really excited for you guys to hear from her. Her name is McKenna Dietrich, and she is a caretaker. She's actually a wife and a mom of, she's wife of a hemophilia dude in our community, and her daughter actually has mild hemophilia. And she has started an Instagram, TikTok influencer page to really bring awareness to hemophilia. And she's great. And she's going to talk about our recent program at Believe Limited, Beyond Our Blood. She did some work for us promoting that, and just to kind of hear a little bit more of her story. So anyway, can't wait to have her on.
That's tremendous. And on the next episode, we also have the latest from our gene therapy segment that is made possible with support from CSL Behring. And I know we're wrapping up.
Yeah.
This is the outro, Amy Board. But just one more thing. I did attend an advisory board
That's right.
earlier this week.
Yeah.
And it was eye-opening to me and many others in that room how many people have been dosed with Hemgenics. You know, we've discussed the initial patients out of that
Right.
Wisconsin Outreach
Right.
Center, but I didn't realize that there have now been like 6 or 7 centers that have dosed patients, and that there are dozens of centers around the country that are equipped to do it. So there's been a bit more of an uptake than I was aware of,
Yeah.
and that the room was aware of. We've all kind of heard about the Wisconsin story, but like there's something happening. So kind of cool to bring more attention to that.
Yeah.
And it makes me, all the more proud that we're doing this segment and
Heck yeah.
increasing awareness about what gene therapy is all about. So just wanted to get that out there. That'll be on the next episode, July 14th. And with that, that is all for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Bloodstream Podcast wherever you listen to have the next episode delivered to you the moment it goes live.
And as always, email us at mailbag@bloodstreammedia.com. You can inquire about our casting opportunities at Bloodstream Media and Believe Limited, or you can find us on social media. Bloodstream Media, Patrick James Lynch, Amy Board. We're all on the things.
Just stating the nouns. I am your host, Patrick James Lynch.
And I am your other host, Amy Board.
She's Paris bound, and that's okay. She's fine with it.
I'm
and
fine.
until next time, take self-care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
I'm fine.
Au revoir.